What if the greatest racehorse of a generation hadn't disappeared at all, but had been buried alive beneath the very ground people walked on every day? For 3 years, the racing world mourned a legend. The stable was abandoned. The trophy case gathered dust. Then a weathered man with arthritis in his knees bought the foreclosed property for pennies on the dollar, planning nothing more than a quiet place to die. What he found in the darkness below would expose a crime so calculated, a betrayal so complete, that it would shake an entire industry. And the horse, the impossible, beautiful horse, would teach him that some debts can only be paid with courage. This is a story about greed, about loyalty, and about the price of silence. If you believe that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the light, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us share more stories like this one. The hill country of Paddlestone, Tennessee, is a land of rolling green contradictions. It is a place where millionaire horse farms with white plank fences sit uncomfortably beside rusted single wides, where the smell of money and manure mix in the humid air, and where fortunes are won and lost on the speed of a 1,000-pound animal's heart. The thoroughbred industry here is not a sport. It is a religion with its own gods, its own temples, and its own very specific rules about what happens to those who fall from grace. For 3 years, Riverside Meadows had been a temple in ruins. The farm, once a jewel in the racing world's crown, sat empty and decaying on 80 acres of overgrown pasture. The main barn's roof sagged. The white fences were gray with rot and streaked with green mold. The driveway was cracked, weeds pushing through like broken bones. The property had been foreclosed, tied up in bankruptcy court, and no one in the tight-knit racing community would touch it. It carried a stain, a curse. It was the place where everything had gone wrong. Andrew Wade was 68 years old, and he had no interest in curses or racing or the complicated politics of wealthy men and their expensive animals. He was a man at the end of things. His career as a ranch hand and livestock auctioneer in Wyoming was 40 years behind him. His wife, gone 6 years to a stroke that took her in the garden while planting tomatoes. His daughter, a nurse in Denver, called once a month out of duty, not love. He had lived the last 3 years in a cramped apartment in a retirement complex in Cheyenne, where the walls were thin, the coffee was weak, and every day felt exactly like the one before it. He was not suicidal. He was simply done. Done with noise. Done with people. Done with the exhausting pretense that tomorrow mattered. When the county auction listing appeared online, a foreclosed horse farm in Tennessee for $47,000, the price of a used pickup truck, he didn't hesitate. He liquidated his meager savings, bought it sight unseen, and drove east in a 20-year-old truck, with a camper shell, his entire life packed in 6 cardboard boxes. He was not looking for a new beginning. He was looking for a quiet place to end. The first time Andrew saw Riverside Meadows, it was a cold morning in late November. The sky was low and gray, pressing down like a lid. Fog clung to the fields, erasing the horizon. He pulled his truck through the open, tilted gate, and the property felt less like a farm than a graveyard. The main house was a 2-story colonial with peeling paint and shattered windows. The porch sagged. The barn, a massive structure with a faded green roof, leaned slightly to one side, its doors hanging open like a mouth mid-scream. He parked, climbed out, and his knees popped. The air smelled of wet leaves and rot, and something faintly metallic he couldn't place. It was perfect. No neighbors, no noise, just silence and decay. He walked the property slowly, his boots crunching on gravel and broken glass. The pastures were overgrown with thistles and wild blackberry. The fences collapsed in places. The smaller outbuildings, a feed shed and equipment garage, were picked clean, stripped by scavengers. He found a rusted trough, a pile of moldy hay bales, and the skeleton of a riding mower. He found no life. He spent the first week simply existing. He slept in the camper's shell, ate canned soup heated on a camp stove, and avoided the house, which felt too large, too full of someone else's ghosts. He spent his days walking the land, clearing small areas of brush, feeling the ache in his back and knees and welcoming it. Pain was honest. Pain was proof he was still something. On the 8th day, he decided to explore the barn. It was a practical decision. Winter was coming. He needed to store firewood, and maybe set up a better sleeping area than the truck. The barn's interior was cavernous and dark, the only light coming through gaps in the roof where shingles had blown away. The smell hit him first. Mildew, rotting wood, and beneath that, something animal and old. He walked carefully, the floorboards groaning. The main level was a wreck. Stalls with broken gates, their floors covered in ancient straw and rat droppings. Tack hooks on the walls, empty. A wall of trophy photos, their frames shattered, the faces behind the glass stained with water and mold. He saw them, but didn't look closely. He didn't care about the past. In the far corner, near the old feed room, he noticed something odd. The floor was wrong. The wooden planks in the 10-foot square section didn't match the rest. They were newer, less weathered. He knelt, his knees cracking, and ran his gloved hand over them. The wood was different, cleaner. He pulled at one plank. It lifted easily, too easily. It wasn't nailed down. It was a cover. Beneath it was not dirt or a foundation. It was a trapdoor. A heavy steel door set into a concrete frame, with a rusted padlock the size of his fist. His heart, which had been beating slowly for years, kicked once. Hard. Andrew stared at the trap door for a long time. His mind, sluggish from disuse, turned over possibilities. A storm shelter, a root cellar, a bootlegger's cache from Prohibition. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself to leave it alone. But his hands, acting on some old instinct buried under years of apathy, were already pulling the bolt cutters from his toolbox. The lock was old but solid. It took 3 tries, the muscles in his forearms burning before the shackle snapped with a brittle crack that echoed in the barn. He lifted the steel door. It was heavy, groaning on seized hinges, and a smell rose from below that made him gag. It was not death. It was worse. It was the smell of living decay. Ammonia, rot, feces, and something else. Fear. The air that came up was warm and wet and wrong. He fumbled for his flashlight, clicked it on, and shone it down. A set of concrete stairs descended into darkness. His first instinct was to close the door. His second was to call someone, police, county officials, someone. But Andrew Wade had spent the last 3 years avoiding people, avoiding questions, avoiding everything. He clicked the flashlight brighter and started down. The stairs were steep, damp with condensation. The walls were concrete block, sweating. The smell grew unbearable. At the bottom, the flashlight beam swept across a nightmare. It was a stable, an underground stable. A basement carved out of the earth and reinforced with concrete and steel beams. There were 4 stalls, 2 on each side of a narrow aisle, with steel bars instead of wooden gates. 3 of the stalls were empty, their floors caked in ancient filth. The 4th was not. In the 4th stall, a horse stood. It did not move when the light hit it. It simply stood, its head low, its body a skeletal framework of bone wrapped in a dull, filthy coat. Its ribs were visible, each one a sharp ridge. Its hip bones jutted like broken wings. Its legs, once powerful, were thin as saplings, trembling with the effort of standing. Its eyes, enormous and dark, reflected the flashlight beam with a dull, empty gaze. It was alive. Barely. Andrew Wade, a man who had spent 40 years working with animals, who had seen every kind of neglect and cruelty the livestock trade could produce, felt his stomach lurch. He staggered back, his hand against the wall, breathing through his mouth. The horse did not react. It simply stood, swaying slightly in a space no larger than a prison cell, in total darkness in its own waste. There was a water trough, dry and cracked. There was a feed bucket, empty except for mold. There was nothing else. No light, no air circulation, no way out. Andrew climbed the stairs, his legs shaking, and vomited in the dirt outside the barn. He sat there for 10 minutes, his head in his hands, trying to understand. Someone had put that horse down there. Someone had locked it in. Someone had left it to die. But it hadn't died. It had survived. For how long? Weeks? Months? The realization made his skin crawl. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his hands trembling, and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. He tried to explain. A horse. Underground. Locked in. Dying. His voice cracked. The dispatcher asked him to repeat himself. He did. She said she would send someone. Animal control. The sheriff. He hung up and sat in the cold dirt, staring at the open trap door. And for the first time in 3 years, Andrew Wade felt something other than emptiness. He felt rage. An hour later, a sheriff's deputy arrived, followed by a county animal control officer, a woman in her 40s with a tight braid and a face that had seen too much. Her name was Officer Reese. She listened to Andrew's explanation, her expression hard, then descended into the basement. She came up 5 minutes later, her face pale. She made a phone call, then another, then another. Within 2 hours, Riverside Meadows was no longer a forgotten ruin. It was a crime scene. The operation to extract the horse took 3 hours. It required a veterinarian, Dr. Philip Grant, a man in his 60s with a gray beard and the calm, exhausted demeanor of someone who had spent a lifetime stitching the world back together. It required a trailer with a ramp, 3 deputies, Officer Reese, and Andrew, who refused to leave. The horse, impossibly, walked up the stairs on its own. It moved like a ghost, each step a painful, trembling effort, its hooves scraping on the concrete. When it emerged into the pale gray daylight, blinking and swaying, the small crowd of officials went silent. Dr. Grant approached slowly, murmuring, his hands gentle. He checked the horse's eyes, its gums, its heartbeat. He shook his head. The animal was in severe malnutrition, dehydration, and shock. It should not be alive. It should not be standing, but it was. They loaded it into the trailer with painful slowness. The horse did not resist. It simply moved forward as if it had forgotten how to do anything else. Andrew watched, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. Officer Reese stood beside him. She was writing in a notepad. "How long?" she asked. "Have you owned this property?" 8 days. "You didn't know about the basement?" "No." "Do you know who owned this property before you?" Andrew shook his head. "Some racing outfit. Went bankrupt." Officer Reese stopped riding. She looked at him, then at the barn. This was Riverside Meadows. This was the farm owned by the Hardin family. Richard Hardin. The name meant nothing to Andrew. Should it? She nodded slowly. 3 years ago, this farm was one of the top breeding and training operations in the state. They had a horse, a champion, a 3-year-old colt that won every major race in the region. He was worth millions, insured for $5 million. His name was Copper Bay, and one night he vanished, just gone. They claimed he was stolen. There was an investigation, but no evidence. The insurance paid out. Richard Hardin collected the money, and 6 months later, the farm went bankrupt anyway. Hardin disappeared, moved to Florida. No one ever found the horse. Andrew felt the world tilt. He looked at the trailer, at the skeletal, trembling animal inside. "You think?" Officer Reese closed her notebook. "I think we need to run a DNA test." The confirmation came back in 72 hours. The horse in the basement, the living skeleton that had been locked in darkness for 3 years, was Copper Bay, the greatest young racehorse the region had ever produced. The horse that had vanished without a trace. The horse whose insurance payout had been $5 million. The horse that the owner, Richard Hardin, had reported stolen, knowing all along that it was buried alive 20 feet beneath his own barn. The story exploded. News vans appeared on the broken driveway. Reporters stood in front of the sagging barn, their voices breathless with outrage, describing the unimaginable cruelty, the calculated fraud, the miracle of survival. The Racing Commission launched an investigation. The FBI got involved for the insurance fraud. Richard Hardin, living comfortably in a gated community in Sarasota, was arrested at his home, his face a mask of indignant shock. Andrew Wade, the man who had simply wanted a quiet place to be alone, found himself at the center of a media storm he wanted no part of. He refused interviews. He refused to appear on camera. He gave one statement to the sheriff: "I just found him. That's all." The real story, he said, was the horse. Copper Bay was transferred to an emergency equine rehabilitation facility 2 hours north. The prognosis was grim. 3 years of darkness, malnutrition, and isolation had destroyed his body, and likely his mind. Dr. Grant, the veterinarian, was blunt. Even if his body heals, his spirit won't. No animal can endure what he endured and come back. But the facility tried. They tried because the world was watching. Andrew Wade did not return to his quiet solitude. He found he couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the horse in the beam of his flashlight, standing in its own filth, waiting. He drove to the rehabilitation facility. He told himself it was just to check, just to see. The facility was clean and bright, the opposite of the basement. Copper Bay was in a large, airy stall with soft bedding and gentle lighting. He was hooked to IV fluids, his body covered in blankets. He stood in the same position he had stood underground, his head low, his eyes empty. The facility director, a woman named Dr. Ellen Park, met Andrew at the stall door. She was kind but honest. "He's eating, slowly. His body is responding to treatment, but he doesn't interact. He doesn't acknowledge us. He's not here. Not really." "Can I?" Andrew started, then stopped. "Can I see him?" Dr. Park nodded. She opened the stall door. Andrew stepped inside, moving slowly. The horse did not react. Andrew stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking at the animal. Up close, even starved, even broken, he could see the bone structure, the elegant lines that had made this horse a champion. "I'm sorry," Andrew said quietly. The horse's ear flicked, just once. Andrew visited every day. He told no one. He simply drove the 2 hours north, sat in the stall, and talked. He talked about nothing. About the weather, about the farm, about his wife, about the garden she loved, about the tomatoes she never got to harvest. He talked because the silence in the stall felt wrong. On the fourth visit, Copper Bay took a step toward him. Just one step, but it was a step. On the seventh visit, the horse lowered his head and rested his muzzle just briefly against Andrew's shoulder. Dr. Park watched from outside the stall, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The recovery was slow, painfully slow. Weeks became months. Copper Bay gained weight, his ribs slowly disappearing beneath muscle. His coat, once dull and matted, began to shine under the careful grooming of the facility staff. But his eyes remained distant, haunted. The Racing Commission issued its findings. Richard Hardin had orchestrated the entire scheme. He had drugged the horse, faked the theft, hidden him in the basement stable he had secretly constructed, and planned to let him die slowly while collecting the insurance. The plan had been perfect except for one thing. The horse had refused to die. Hardin was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud and animal cruelty. The racing world, shaken and furious, established new oversight rules. But none of it mattered to Andrew. He was not interested in justice. He was interested in the horse. By spring, Copper Bay was medically stable. Dr. Park called Andrew into her office. He's as healthy as he's going to get, physically. His mind, though, that's another question. He's shut down. We've tried everything. He needs something we can't give him. He needs a purpose, or he needs to be let go. Let go? Andrew's voice was sharp. She meant euthanasia, a kind ending. Andrew stood. No, absolutely not. Dr. Park sighed. Then he needs a home, somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. We can't keep him here indefinitely. Andrew looked out the window at the pasture where Copper Bay stood alone, unmoving. I'll take him. Dr. Park raised an eyebrow. You understand he'll never race again. He may never be normal. He's not a pet project, Andrew. He's a deeply traumatized animal. I know, Andrew said. I'll take him anyway. Andrew brought Copper Bay back to Riverside Meadows on a morning in early April. The farm had changed. Andrew had spent the winter working. He had repaired the fences, cleared the pastures, rebuilt one of the smaller barns. He had burned the main barn to the ground, the basement filled with concrete. He would not leave that darkness intact. He had used almost all of his remaining money. He had no plan beyond today. Copper Bay stepped off the trailer, his head high for the first time, his nostrils flaring. He looked at the open pasture, the green grass, the sky. He took 3 steps, forward and stopped. Andrew unclipped the lead rope. Go on. The horse didn't move. Andrew waited. 5 minutes, 10. Then Copper Bay took 1 step, then another. He walked slowly into the pasture. He lowered his head and tore a mouthful of grass. He chewed. He took another step. Andrew stood by the fence, his throat tight. Over the next weeks, something shifted. Copper Bay began to move. Not much. But he would walk the fence line. He would stand in the sun. One morning, Andrew walked out to the pasture and the horse, for the first time, walked toward him. That afternoon, a truck pulled into the driveway. A man climbed out, middle-aged, wearing a suit. His name was Gerald Moss. He was a lawyer representing a group of investors. They wanted to buy Copper Bay, for breeding, for his bloodline. They were offering $200,000. Andrew looked at the man, then at the horse, grazing in the pasture. He's not for sale. Mr. Moss's expression tightened. Mr. Wade, that horse is worth a fortune. His genetics alone are invaluable. You're living in a camper. You have no income. This is a generous offer. Andrew smiled, a thin, hard smile. I didn't ask for your generosity. Now get off my land. The lawyer left. Others came, reporters, breeders, racing officials. Andrew turned them all away. The horse was not for sale. The horse was not a commodity. The horse was home. By summer, Riverside Meadows had become something unexpected. Word spread quietly through the rural networks of Tennessee. The man who saved the champion was taking in horses no one else wanted. Andrew didn't plan it. It simply happened. A woman brought a 30-year-old mare, blind and arthritic, that her children wanted to put down. Andrew took her. A farmer brought a gelding with a shattered leg that had healed wrong. Andrew took him. Within 6 months, he had 9 horses, all of them broken in some way, all of them unwanted. He called it a sanctuary, though he hated the word. It was just a place where animals that had suffered could exist without being useful. He ran it on almost nothing. Donations trickled in after a local newspaper ran a feature. A feed store gave him a discount. A retired veterinarian volunteered her time. Andrew worked every day, sunrise to sunset, his body aching, his hands cracked and bleeding. He had never been happier. Copper Bay, the horse that had survived the impossible, became something else. He became a guardian. The new horses, terrified and broken, would be placed in the pasture, and Copper Bay would approach them. Slowly, carefully, he would stand beside them. He would groom them. He would, in his quiet way, tell them it was safe. Andrew watched this day after day and understood. The horse was healing by helping others heal. On a warm evening in late August, Andrew sat on the fence, watching the herd graze in the golden light. Copper Bay stood in the center, his coat gleaming, his body strong. He was not the champion he had been, but he was whole. A truck pulled up. Andrew sighed, ready to turn away another buyer. But the woman who climbed out was not a buyer. She was young, maybe 30, with a camera around her neck. She introduced herself as a filmmaker. She wanted to make a documentary about the farm, about the horses, about second chances. Andrew said no. She asked why. Because, Andrew said, they've suffered enough. They don't need to be watched. She nodded. She handed him a card. If you change your mind. She left. Andrew looked at the card, then at the horses. He didn't throw it away. The years that followed were quiet. Riverside Meadows Sanctuary grew slowly. More horses came, more volunteers. A small barn was built with donated materials. A local high school started a program where students could visit, learning empathy by grooming animals that had known cruelty. Andrew aged. His knees got worse. His back hurt every morning, but he woke up with purpose. Copper Bay, now in his teens, moved slower, but he still stood watch over the herd. He still greeted each new horse with the same patient, gentle presence. One winter morning, Andrew found him lying in the pasture. He was not dead. He was simply tired. Andrew sat beside him in the cold grass, his hand on the horse's neck. You did good, boy. You did real good. Copper Bay's eye, dark and deep, looked at him. There was no fear in it. There was peace. The horse died that afternoon, in the sun, surrounded by the herd he had protected. Andrew buried him on the hill overlooking the farm, under an old oak tree. He carved a simple marker: Copper Bay, champion, survivor, guardian. The media came back, briefly, for the story of the horse's death. Andrew gave no interviews. He simply continued the work. The farm continued. More horses came, more were saved. On the first anniversary of Copper Bay's death, Andrew stood at the grave. The farm below was alive with motion. Horses grazed, volunteers laughed. The sun was warm. He thought about the man he had been 3 years ago. Empty, done, ready to disappear. He thought about the horse in the darkness, refusing to die. He realized they had saved each other. If this story moved you, if you believe that even the deepest wounds can heal and that every life has value, subscribe to our channel and share this video. Some stories need to be told. Some truths need to be remembered.